A very good afternoon. The Energy and Resources Institute and the World Wind Energy Association are jointly hosting World Wind Energy Conference 2021, scheduled from 24th to 26th of November under the theme Powering the World with Wind and Sun. Though the title reflects wind energy, the conference addresses wind, solar, and other renewable energy sources, as well as green hydrogen and RE in transport sector. The conference will focus on clean energy transition, propelled by spectacular progress of renewable energy with prime focus on accelerating the capacity additions of wind and solar energy into the country's energy system in line with the Paris Agreement. While discussing the technology innovations and capturing sectorial growth around the world, important contemporary topics would be discussed by international experts. The conference will provide a platform to capture learnings and experiences from various parts of the world and also from India. We're delighted to have with us an esteemed panel of speakers at the inaugural session today. Honorable Peter Ray, President, World Wind Energy Association, Dr. Vibha Dhawan, Director General, the Energy and Resources Institute, Dr. Ajay Mathur, Director General, International Solar Alliance, Mr. Suman Sinha, Founder, Chairman and CEO, Renew Power, Mr. Tulsi Tanti, Founder, Chairman, Suzlon, His Excellency Hans Jacob Ferdinand, Ambassador of Norway to India, Mr. Stefan Sagner, Secretary General, World Wind Energy Association, Ms. Gauri Singh, Deputy Director General, International Renewable Energy Agency, and Mr. N.S. Prasad, Senior Fellow, the Energy and Resources Institute. I would now invite Mrs. Stefan to take over today's proceedings. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, and I would like to welcome everyone. A very good morning, a very good afternoon, a very good evening from wherever you are joining us. It's my great pleasure here after 2 years after our 18th World Wind Energy Conference, which was held, exactly 2 years ago in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro. Now that we can open our 19th World Wind Energy Conference, which is held in collaboration with TERI, and it's my great pleasure to now have so many high-level experts and speakers with us here during this opening ceremony. My name is Stefan Xenger, as it was said, and I'm going to guide you through this opening panel. And it's my pleasure as the first speaker to invite the President of the World Wind Energy Association, the Honorable Peter Ray, who is joining us from Australia, from Launceston in Tasmania. Peter, may I request you to welcome our participants.
This conference, the WWEA 19th World Conference, comes at a very special time. We've just had the Glasgow COP, and that takes a little while for everybody to adjust to the changes that were made to the programs of the world in relation to renewable energy and climate change. But we're also having the first virtual conference. It's being held in the most populous country in the world, and therefore the country with the greatest number of people at risk from climate change and sustainability problems. Highlighting the need for action and discussing and presenting parts of the total answer of these threats to life on Earth as we know it is what this conference will be all about. It's about powering the world with wind and sun, and that's an important part of the future of the world. We welcome the role played by our co-hosts, TERI, who have done an extraordinarily good job in putting together in difficult circumstances with the virus and the restrictions and the problems which that creates. We have together, I think, a great list of expert speakers from around the world, and to those who are participating as audience, through to those who are the speakers and the organisers, can I say thank you very much. We proudly welcome all, one and all, to the 19th World Conference of the WWEA. Now let me tell you a little about the WWEA. It was formed at the beginning of the century and now has over 600 members from more than 1,000 countries, and we've held conferences around the world, South Africa and North Africa, Cape Town to Cairo. We've had conferences in Pakistan and India previously. We've had Beijing and Shanghai. We've had Germany and through to Jerusalem. It's I can't mention all, but if I can just say, from Cape Town to Cairo, Melbourne to Tokyo, Kingston in Canada to Rio, Europe and the Middle East, China and throughout Asia, we now return to New Delhi. And when we were in New Delhi on the previous occasion, we had the privilege of the conference being opened by the then President of India, Dr. Abdul Kalam, who showed incredible strength and foresight in saying to us at that opening, the crying need, therefore, is to look for renewable energy that alone can ensure sustainable development. He called for a comprehensive renewable energy policy with mandatory and time-bound provisions is an urgent need of the hour. And we've followed on from there, and now we're back again. And the conference we're about to start reminds me that it would be useful to understand a little more of the role, those who are participating, to understand a little more of the role of the WWEA. And we participated in the development of the International Renewable Energy Agency, did a lot of work in the, starting from the inception of this organisation, calling for such a body, and doing a lot of work in the preparation for that. We played a firm role in the formation of the REN Alliance, which brought together the top associations in the world in not only wind, but in hydro and solar and geothermal and bioenergy. We were on the formation committee of REN 21, which is the major organisation in the world now, providing the statistics, reliable statistics, and identifying the policies which are being implemented around the world by the various countries. We formed a part in the development of the International Renewable Energy Conferences, the ICACs, and they were held first in Beijing and then followed in Washington, and they've gone on from there, including one held in Delhi, which was a very successful conference to about 2010. I believe that it's fair to say that the WWEA has been at the forefront of the campaign to recognise the need for sustainability and to take specific action in relation to climate change and how that can be achieved, the ways in which it can be developed, and trying to ensure that the people of the world, as many as possible, understand what the issues are and understand what the resolution can be. It's something which will be benefited by, I'm sure, that this conference can help us get that message out to the world. And I look forward to hearing the various speakers in their various categories of expertise that we will be having over the next 3 days. I'm proud to talk of what we've achieved as an organisation, and I'm proud to be able to have now the opportunity with Terry and with Viva Dhawan, Dr. Dhawan, to open the conference. It's something which I believe that we can all be proud of having got this far, and I thank the organisers, WebCon, for providing what I hope is going to be a very successful means of having a conference during a time when travel is difficult. Let me say to one and all, I wish you well for the conference. I wish you well for the future. I wish you well for your businesses. And to India, may I say, I wish you well in the program which I know you're undertaking to achieve the ambition outlined by your former president. Let me now hand back to our moderator, Stefan Kasanga, and thank you very much. The conference is formally open.
Thank you very much, Peter, and indeed for reminding us of this great event that we had 15 years ago. It's now 15 years that we had already this World Wind Energy Conference held together with Indian partners. Now let me go to our next speaker. It's my great pleasure to invite our co-host, Dr. Vibha Dhawan, who is the Director General of TERI. TERI, a very world-famous organization, which of course everybody knows, which I don't need to introduce any further. Dr. Dhawan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for your very kind words. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all. His Excellency, Mr. Hans Jacob, Ambassador of Norway to India, His Excellency, Dr. Ajay Mathur, Director General ISA, Mr. Tulsi Tanti, Founder, Chairman, and Managing Director of Suzlon Group, Mr. Suman Sinha, Founder, Chairman, and CEO of Renew Power, Peter, President WWEA, Mr. Stephen, distinguished speakers, experts, and delegates. On behalf of TERI and Organizing Committee of WWEC 2021, I extend a warm welcome to all to the 19th World Wind Energy Conference 2021. The conference is happening at an appropriate time on the heels of the recently concluded successful UNFCCC Conference of Parties COP26 on climate change in Glasgow, UK. TERI has also conducted a number of initiatives, including a roundtable on low carbon transition. The conference has ended with positive note on keeping 1.5 degree target alive, and our Honorable Prime Minister has announced, I should say, a number of initiatives which shows his vision and commitment for India to emerge as a green nation. The 5 commitments or the 5 points which we all are discussing ever since we came back from Glasgow is that India will take its non-fossil energy capacity to 500 gigawatts by 2030. India will meet 50% of its energy requirements from renewable energy by 2030. And India will reduce the total projected carbon emissions by 1 billion tons from now till 2030. And you really need to see these figures because it is from now, because in any case, our requirements are going to go up. We are a developing or growing nation, and therefore the carbon emissions, really speaking, are supposed to go up. And while we are committing that we are going to reduce it to such a level. By 2030, India will reduce the carbon intensity of its economy by less than 45%. And by the year 2070, India will achieve the target of net zero. I'll call them very bold statements because right now we haven't peaked. We are going to go much bigger in terms of our carbon footprint before we can see the decline. And this 2030 targets, that gives assurance to the companies as well that there is commitment at the highest level, and what is voluntary today may become mandatory in years to come. Now, our vision for future of India in the global community is a fossil fuel-free world with zero carbon emissions. To realize this, renewables are going to play an important role, and as global community of renewable energy leaders, it is our responsibility to make this vision happen. The World Wind Energy Conference will bring together experts, policymakers, industry captains to dwell upon the common future we look forward to and the role that renewables will play in this important mission. As a pioneering organization, TERI is committed to equitable and just energy transition, and as part of our actions, TERI has recently launched, in fact in Glasgow, its Charter of Actions during the COP26, and we'll be happy to share the copy of the same. It's on our website. And the Charter has clearly brought out role for renewable energy in India's future. Renewables are going to be a major tool for us in the fight against the climate change. And India has consistently stepped up its RE capacity targets to 175 gigawatts by the year 2022 and 500 gigawatts by 2030. For power sector decarbonization through the large-scale deployment of renewable energy, viable storage alternatives will be needed to meet evening peak demand. Green hydrogen technologies are expected to play an important role in extending the use of renewable energy beyond electricity to industrial processes, long distance transport, and flexible storage of renewable power, and so on. Apart from side supply measures, there is also a need to boost demand from renewable electricity by pushing technologies such as electric vehicles and so on. Further, to realize Goal 7 of the SDGs, along with large-scale renewable energy deployment, there is a need to raise awareness and deploy innovative models for ensuring energy access for improved livelihoods and well-being in rural areas through options such as distributed renewable energy. The time is now right to translate principles and ambitions into much needed actions. And I trust this conference happening over next 3 days will focus on the same. This conference provides a platform for global renewable energy community to come together and discuss the opportunities and challenges for renewable energy driven future. I take this opportunity to express my sincere thanks to all and Norway Embassy, DG ISA, Suzlon, Renew Power in particular in supporting us organizing this mega event. As said earlier, we would have loved to have this event in person, and gradually countries are opening up. So I'm sure we'll have better years ahead, and we should thank God that we are now seeing end of the tunnel for COVID. And I'm sure next few years or the next decade will be decade of action where many of our dreams will come true. So I wish you this conference a grand success, and thank you so much for choosing Terry to partner with you. And I'm sure we'll come up to your expectations, or rather above and beyond. So that's what our dream is. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Viba Dhawan. It's been a great pleasure working with you indeed, and it's a pity that we cannot here not applaud what you have just said. That is, of course, one of the little bit downsides of such online events, but it's great to see that we have people from around the world joining, and I think virtually we're all applauding to you and to your words. And again, thank you very much for an excellent collaboration. Now, I would like to kind of introduce the program, explain a little bit the program. Actually, what we've been trying to do is what we usually do in a Presence World Wind Energy Conference. And as I've mentioned, we've had already 18 previous events, which were all held physically, of course. We will have parallel sessions, 3 parallel sessions, which you find on the program, the conference program, which cover many different topics close to the main theme, powering the world with wind and sun. Indeed, this is following this main topic, which I think is now reaching the world stage. The leaders in Glasgow just decided to do more steps towards a renewable energy future. Of course, we want to accelerate this development by bringing together the experts, the practitioners in this conference. So in total, we have 30 sessions every day, around 10 sessions with many people from around the world. It's more than 30 countries which are participating as speakers in our conference. So when you are on the platform, on the internet platform, you can choose the 3 conference halls, and you can choose which session you want to join. There is now, following directly after this inauguration, a track which starts with wind and solar power markets around the world, which gives you first-hand information about the status of the most important wind power markets. We have other panels, maybe many other panels, which we also do in collaboration with partner organizations, like with KfW Investors Talk about investment perspectives in this field. We have a session with the World Bank about batteries in electric vehicles, which will take place later today. We have sessions on wind and solar technology. This all takes place today. Please have a look. You can also just look into one room and then visit other room as well. Tomorrow we will start with a plenary session, a high-level plenary session, which deals with the topic working together for making transportation based on renewable energies. And it's a great pleasure that the Honorable Minister for Transportation of the Government of India has agreed to join this session and contribute a keynote. Aside from experts from all the renewable energy technology, international technology associations. That day, we will also have a joint session together with the ARENA Coalition for Action on community energy, where we will present the white paper on community energy, which was just developed by the Coalition for Action Community Energy Working Group of ARENA. There will be sessions on offshore wind energy, on job creation and education. There will be sessions on pumped hydro, on storage systems, and on local acceptance for wind turbines, as well as on international and national renewable energy initiatives, and a very important topic at this point of time on green hydrogen. The third day, again, we will start with the plenary session, which will comprise CEOs from different renewable energy companies, which will present what they expect, that what needs to be done, that they can achieve the climate goals and the renewable energy targets. This plenary session will be followed by sessions on wind power policies. On small wind, there will be 2 sessions on small wind, which we believe is especially also important for India. There will be a session on international market practices, also on large-scale hybrid systems, which is where India is without doubt a leader. Many other countries are looking into this as well. We will have session on digitalization, which will present about the future of the energy markets. And we will, of course, also deal with the session on renewable energy grid design, which is one of the key aspects as well to achieve the targets that we need. During the closing ceremony, we will summarize the session with a high-level government representative from the government of India. We're very pleased about this. So I hope I could give you a good overview. Please have a look on the conference platform, what you want to present, what you want to participate in. You can always also ask questions to the panelists, and I'm looking forward to fruitful discussions over the next 3 days. With this, I have the pleasure to invite our next speaker, and it's a great honor to have with us Dr. Ajay Mathur, who is the Director General of the International Solar Alliance. Dr. Mathur, when we started discussing having this conference here, you were still the Director General at TERI, so you're kind of responsible for that we meet today, and it's a great pleasure that we can have you here with us now representing this very important international organization. And it's my pleasure and my honor to invite you now to welcome our participants and to speak to the audience.
Thank you very much, Stefan. I can't tell you what a delight it is for me that this conference is happening despite being in a virtual mode. Mr. Ray, Dr. Vibha Dhawan, my dear friend Gauri, who will join us through a recorded message, Suman, Tulsi Bhai, Ambassador Ferdinand, and of course my colleague from TERI, N.S. Prasad. A very, very warm morning to all of you on this session, as well to everybody, to all the participants who have joined today's meeting. This is an important meeting, as Mr. Ray and Dr. Dhawan both mentioned. It comes right after COP26 in Glasgow, where for the first time, I have seen a huge emphasis by countries, by companies on things they can do together. Not all the countries of the world, but some of them getting together for particular initiative. Some companies getting together for a particular initiative, all aimed at reducing carbon emissions. This emphasis on action by coalitions, which takes us towards the implementation of what is discussed inside the negotiating rooms, is indeed amazingly important. It tells us how important action is now. We have moved from the era of negotiations to the era of action. And at this point of time, as was mentioned earlier, we have a large group across the world which is looking at a future which is carbon free, or let me say carbon emissions free. This is important because what it tells us is that in the future, we are looking, and that future may be 2040, 2050, 2060, 2070, whatever it is. But we are looking at a future in which all the electricity in the world, and I would argue even all the energy in the world, because the energy would come from the splitting of water to produce hydrogen, but using renewable electricity. So renewable electricity comes from wind and solar, comes from hydro, comes from biomass, and there will be some nuclear energy as well to supplement this. This is important because what it tells us is that the energy system of tomorrow would be an amalgamation of all of these renewable energy and nuclear energy sources. I particularly look at the combination of wind energy and solar energy and look at a future which is not only viable, but now makes more sense than it ever did. Why does it make more sense? From a technical side, we can say that there are huge complementarities between wind and solar. Wind typically reaches its peak at night when solar is not available, and the solar peak occurs when wind is typically not available. I do realize this is a huge generalization, but like all generalizations, it has a large amount of truth in it. We also see that in wind farms, there are large spaces in between wind turbines, which could be effectively used to put solar energy systems. Doing this together obviously implies a bit of a yin and yang between wind and solar. It will work in some places, it will not work in others. Some Italian researchers carried out an analysis of 100 sites and looked at the local complementarity with monthly correlation coefficients on these sites. And they found large scale complementarity. I think the coefficients were between, 0.65 and 0.6. This is important because what it tells us is that as we move towards providing reliable electricity and not just intermittent electricity, a combination often becomes viable. Yes, there will be wind energy systems where you can't hybridize. Offshore systems are difficult, at least today. But land-based systems, it makes great sense. This also helps grid managers to know that they have got a more steady supply than they would if you have got a wind farm or a solar farm alone. Obviously, site selection is important. But generally speaking, as a rule of thumb, I would say that in almost every geography, even in the northern latitudes where solar irradiation is poor, but wind energy is high, solar and wind together make great sense. So there are enticing opportunities. There will be some places where this will happen earlier, and the numbers that the International Solar Alliance has crunched suggests that the Mediterranean coast, as in the Italian example that I talked about earlier, or the Horn of Africa, or the Gulf of Mexico, the Central Asian Plain, the Tibetan Plateau, all of these are areas where this hybridization would provide the greater reliability that system managers are looking at. It also makes far better use of land than doing wind and solar separately in those same geographies. I also want to put on the table an initiative which the Solar Alliance had launched at COP26 in Glasgow. This was the One Sun, One World, One Grid initiative, where we are looking at interconnecting large regions of the world so that wind and solar electricity from one region can flow to others. So, for example, areas where it is difficult to generate solar or wind electricity because of a lack of land, and Singapore is a great example, could draw renewable electricity from, say, Australia, where there is land. Or Europe could draw electricity from Africa. But there are also other examples. For example, when it is dark in East Asia, when the sun has set, when there's no solar electricity, solar and wind electricity from India could move to East Asia. Similarly, when it is dark in India, it is still light in the Gulf countries, and therefore solar and wind electricity from the Middle East could flow into India. This, I believe, provides highways for the electricity to be used around the world at the time when we want it. Clearly, the biggest challenge to this is the financial investments being drawn into this sector. But the financial sector, in the financial investment sector, and I think nobody knows this better than the chairman of the World Wind Energy Conference, Mr. Peter Ray, who during his tenure as an Australian senator deeply investigated the Australian capital markets and understands the way they work. There is a problem in the financial sectors as far as risk assessment is concerned. When you take a hybrid project to them, or today, even if you take a solar or wind project to them, there aren't too many financial investment organizations in the world which can do a good risk analysis. And therefore, all of us go to similar kinds of organizations, though I must say that this spectrum is increasing. As we move ahead, it becomes important for us, therefore, to hold the hands of the financial sector and help them develop the protocols that are needed to do the risk assessment of such projects, where the capital costs may be higher because you're doing both solar and wind, but the reliability is much higher, and therefore the risk dramatically falls. We look at also the trading arrangements to get a filling out of the rule book of Paris, which was finalized at COP26, which would enable trading to occur between different parts of the world. As we look to the future, I see that wind and solar together have a future which is unimaginable and was unimaginable even 20 years ago. I look forward to stimulating discussions in the conference and to this conference starting a new revolution in the area of renewable energy. Thank you very much, Stefan. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mathur, and in particular for all the support you're personally giving to this conference, that you're giving to the global shift towards renewable energy, and also with your organization, which plays such an important role in bringing countries together. And it's great to see that this, as an Indian initiative, India together with other countries plays such an important role. Now it's my pleasure to announce our next speaker, which is Mrs. Gauri Singh from the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA. Mrs. Gauri Singh is the Deputy Director General at IRENA. And let me mention that before IRENA was founded, we as WWA were one of the first who suggested and supported the proposal which was made like 15 years ago by Dr. Hermann Scheer, a German member of parliament, that we need such an organization. And I remember that I had a meeting together with Dr. Anil Kane, our president at that time, with the at that time Indian Minister for New and Renewable Energy, around our World Wind Energy Conference 2006, where the Indian government was one of the first indicating their support for such an initiative. So it's very good to see that with Gauri Singh, as the Deputy Director General, India is also represented on such a high level, and it's a great pleasure that I can announce now Gauri Singh and request her welcome address to be displayed.
Good morning, and I'd like to start by thanking the World Wind Energy Association and TERI for inviting me to share my views at their 19th World Wind Energy Conference at Delhi. So I'd actually like to begin by just putting some thoughts across what the post-Glasgow world seems to be looking like. Clearly, there is now not much patience for rhetoric, and the flavor of the day really is geared at the actions that need to be taken between now and the mid-century to be able to meet and limit the climate warming to 1.5 degree centigrade. So I think some of the big emerging trends that we are seeing clearly unfold are that electricity will become the major energy carrier as we move forward. And also what we at IRENA have put out in our analysis is that the growth in demand for electricity will treble, and at the same time the renewables that would be needed to meet that would need to go up nearly 10 times in terms of the deployed capacity. So essentially, what you're looking at is also a nearly a fourfold increase in the investments that will be needed in the wind sector to be able to for the world to move forward on this pathway. So one is really looking at bringing in investments of about 400 billion US dollars a year in both the onshore and the offshore wind taken together, and that's a huge amount and a huge number. But we also know that stable policy structures are actually, they lead to attracting almost 17 times more investment than the policy structures in countries that don't have that kind of stability. Now, India has had a very stable policy structure, and there is also the ecosystem around wind that has been built over the years. But I think now it's also time for the policy thinking to move ahead on how do you repower the wind sector, especially in south of India, where most of the spots and the locations that have high wind potential are actually currently, being used up by the wind plants of much lower capacity. So I think that has to be a very clear thrust in terms of policy to be able to attract investment, and coupling it with a public finance element will help unlock larger amounts of fund flows that the wind industry needs to be able to meet the very ambitious goals that have been set for 2030 by the government. So I think we're really in a very exciting decade where there will be not just huge action on the policy front and innovation coming from a policy, but also the demand for renewables will clearly grow at a much faster pace and start becoming a larger share of the total electricity generation. So let me end here and wish this 19th World Wind Energy Conference all the best. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great pleasure to have Gauri Singh with us. Thank you very much, and greetings to the United Arab Emirates, where Gauri Singh is, of course, located. And Gauri mentioned, same like Dr. Mathur, the importance of investment. And that is why it's especially my pleasure, because, of course, we see that importance as well. To now welcome two speakers who come from the industry, two high-level representatives of the industry. And at first, it's my great pleasure to welcome Mr. Suman Sinha, who is the founder, chairman, and CEO of Renew Power, a very important player in the renewable energy sector. Mr. Suman Sinha, may I hand over to you?
Much for inviting me to speak at this session. It's always a pleasure to listen to the panelists who came before me, Mr. Ajay Mathur, and of course Mrs. Gauri Singh as well. We have talked quite extensively about the renewable energy sector in India as well as globally, and what the opportunities are. Let me talk a little bit from the point of view of a company that is operating in this sector in India right now. Um, the Indian government's target, as we all know, is very robust. The Prime Minister had already laid out a target of 450 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2030, which he later in Glasgow re-emphasized as being 500 gigawatts of non-fossil fuel based electricity generation, and also that 50% of India's total electricity mix would come from non-fossil fuel sources. So these are very, very fundamental and path-breaking commitments, I feel, on the part of the Indian government, and I think really establishes the Indian position as being really, I think, quite extraordinary among other developing countries, which are still seeing a lot of demand growth in the power sector that is happening. And if you look at just India, our demand growth is happening at 5 to 6% every year on the electricity side, and that is likely to intensify as we go forward. So there are a couple of points that jump out from this. Number one, of course, is that as we look even further out to the future beyond 2030, there are various agencies now that are forecasting that the total electricity percentage of total energy will actually increase to about 70% perhaps or thereabouts, up from the current 20%. And so I see a big electrification of the energy sector happening as we go forward. So to me, that is one of the big themes that is going to play out over the next several decades. And the second really is the fact that within electricity, as we know, there is going to be a big decarbonization that will happen. So a lot of that will be driven by renewable energy. And bringing it back to India, even though our target is 450 gigawatts by 2030 for renewable energy, it will obviously continue to grow very substantially even beyond 2030. And given the context that India is a developing country and our demand is growing, the interesting thing is that most of the renewable energy capacity that we add today will actually be going in for the new demand growth that is going to be coming in the Indian sector over the next many years, and will not actually replace, in the sense, existing fossil fuel-based capacities, but will be additive to them, at least for the next 10 years. After that, as coal assets get phased out, as technologies evolve on the renewable energy side, we'll clearly see some shift beginning to happen, but I see that happening beyond 2030. So broadly speaking, I think that's how the sector will play out in India. Now, as far as the 450 gigawatt demand is concerned, or capacity target that the government has set is concerned, clearly, a large part of that is meant to come from solar, and some part of that is meant to come from wind. Today, the capacities of wind and solar installed in India are about 40-45 gigawatts each, roughly in balance. But a lot of the growth is likely to come from solar. The government's initial target out of 450 gigawatts was for 300 gigawatts to be solar and 100 gigawatts thereabouts to be wind, and the balance to come from other sources. I suspect that that might undergo a change, especially given the fact that we can only absorb so much solar capacity at a given point in time. And I see therefore that there will be a rebalancing between the capacities of wind and solar that will be required in the Indian grid over the next several years. And that rebalancing might lead to a little bit less solar and a little bit more wind coming into the system. And there are several ways in which can come into the system. Of course, one is it can be installations of plain vanilla capacities, wind getting set up separately, solar getting set up separately, or Mr. Mathur said, it could actually be these hybridized products, and that's really a very, very interesting aspect of the market evolution. Indian distribution utilities, prefer simpler solutions, and the simplest solution for them is to get something that replaces the baseload nature of coal-based power, which is what they're comfortable acquiring right now. And if we can therefore give them solutions which are more higher plant load factor solutions or higher PLF solutions, using a combination of wind and solar and storage at prices that today are in fact lower than coal-based prices, that eventually ends up being a very attractive solution for them. Now, we saw a bid that happened last year, which our company, Renew Power, had actually won, which required us to deliver 400 megawatts of capacity at about 80% plant load factor. And we were able to price that at a tariff of 3.5 rupees per kilowatt hour, which is significantly cheaper than coal-based power. And it is 80% plant load factor, so it's almost quasi-firm power. And those kinds of solutions, I think, will become more common because they are more grid friendly. They use the transmission network a lot better, and they make it much easier for grids to actually balance their demand and supply side as well. And so I suspect that you'll see more and more of these kinds of bids happening. And in these bids, wind actually has a very central role to play. Now, solar, we know, peaks in the daytime and goes away in the evening. Wind is a little bit more even across the 24 hours of the day, and therefore balances out solar quite well. Of course, wind is a little bit seasonal in India, so you have to manage around that. And that's really where, to some extent, storage also comes in. And I think those kinds of solutions will require a high degree of expertise in understanding how profiles of wind and solar will come together in a way where you can actually optimize the capital cost to the lowest level and also get the least amount of batteries. Over a period of time, I suspect that this solution will work well for the next 4 or 5 years. But over the period of time, as solar continues to become cheaper and wind does not, and batteries begin to become cheaper as well, the solutioning might change a little bit. And you may have more solar, more batteries, and perhaps a little bit less wind. But I certainly see that the role for wind will continue to be there for several years to come, especially in these kinds of solutions. The other thing that I see happening is that as the availability of good wind sites depletes in India, there will be an effort for us to go outside of sort of the land-based borders, and we may have to go to offshore wind. And I think that is something that India needs to start exploring now. And if we start developing those markets today and start developing the offshore wind ecosystem today, then 5 or 10 years later, we can have a situation where you can continue to grow wind offshore, and costs will hopefully have come down quite substantially. And I think that is a solution that we definitely need to start working on right now, even though it is more expensive at this point in time. It is something that the Indian government certainly needs to start investing in and creating that opportunity for growth in offshore wind. So I think as I look to the future, certainly it is a sector that is going to require hundreds of billions of dollars of investment in both wind and solar and storage technologies, also in transmission. The one big area that does require a lot of improvement is the distribution sector in India. That is one area that is going to be central as we need to electrify more and more going forward. If the distribution sector in India is not robust, then that will in fact begin to become a bottleneck to growth. And I would really urge the government to think about, and when I say government, I mean, not just the central government, which of course is very keen to move forward on changing the distribution paradigm in India, but I really mean more the state governments of India. Because as we all know, the state governments are the ones that control the distribution sector. I think that area does need a lot of investment and a lot of reform for us to be able to electrify large swathes of our sector, of the economy, and supply a lot of that electrification through clean energy. The last thing I would touch upon is green hydrogen. We know that green hydrogen is going to be a very, very important aspect of India's energy independence strategy. I see a tremendous amount of renewable energy capacity getting added for generating green hydrogen, which can then go into the hard-to-abate sectors and into mobility sectors. And I think that will be additive to this overall capacity of 450 gigawatts. And that I think will take a few years before it becomes really viable. But beyond that, it will lead to substantial growth beyond 2030. And I think that will really help India tremendously in our efforts to become energy independent. A last word about our company. We have 3,500 megawatts of currently commissioned wind capacity, another 1,500 megawatts in execution, and a total capacity of 7,000 megawatts, which we recently crossed, becoming the first Indian renewable energy company to have crossed 7,000 megawatts of installed capacity. So I think the future is very bright. We certainly hope to play a very important role in that. And it's a very exciting sector. I see a lot of technology evolution and developments happening. And I think this conference is going to explore a lot of areas. And I think it's going to be very interesting for a lot of us to participate in and listen to all the new developments that are going to take place. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you so much for your insights. I think this was very important also for highlighting the main challenges that we see as a renewable energy sector. This conference, we will have sessions discussing those questions. I think you touched upon green hydrogen, direct storage options, as well as the extension of grids, and all this in light of the fact that, of course, electricity will play a much bigger role in the future than it is today. So thank you so much for sharing your views. Now it's my great pleasure to welcome our next speaker, also a very famous industry representative, Mr. Tulsi Tanti. Mr. Tulsi Tanti, you are one of the pioneers of the wind sector in India, and we can say globally, as the founder and still chairman of one of the leading wind turbine manufacturers, Suzlon, which is, we can say, one of the champions in India to advance the renewable revolution in your country, but also globally. It's my great pleasure to invite you to speak about your perspectives on how we can manage the energy revolution in India and worldwide. Mr. Tulsi Tanti.
So thank you very much, Stefan. Respected members on panel and industry's colleague, very good afternoon, good evening, and good an immense pleasure to be a part of the World Wind Energy Conference. For the challenging time, people and governments around the world are fighting the pandemic as well as the working to bring the economy back to the normal trend. It will remain of the world, and India is quite pioneer to build the 50 gigawatt, and nearly 20 gigawatts are in the pipeline. India's power demand is expected to double in the next 12 years. So the country like India need enormous electrons to stimulate and grow our economy on a large extent. And that's why the role of the renewable energy becoming very vital, because India is importing most of the energy, 90%, from the outside. The coupled with India's renewable energy ambitious this market, the country one of the top emerging markets for the we've seen in the last 5 years, the enormous funding and investment is coming because of the lot of regulatory and legal frameworks are so established in the country, which is giving a good the confidence and support to all the global financial investor to invest in the Indian market. But going forward, it will be the enormous opportunity will emerge in India. Recently at the COP26, our Honorable Prime Minister reiterated that the India will reach its non-fossil fuel energy capacity of 500 gigawatt by 2030. It will attract almost more than $500 billion investment opportunity for the financial investor across the world. And that India will meet 50% of energy requirement from renewable energy by 2030. It's really good achievement we will achieve by 2030. Almost we are crossing 30 to 35%. And by 2030, irrespective of economic growth will remain high and demand will remain high, we can able to achieve, and maybe it can reach earlier also. Also, our Prime Minister committed that the year 2070, India will achieve the target of net zero. I think that will be country like India, 1.3 billion populations, and if we can think about India, how, and that will happen by 2050. This revolutionary target cannot be met without the massive contribution by the Indian wind sector that has been nurtured since early 90s. The success of the wind sector in the country during the past 3 decades paved the way for all the renewable sources, including solar development since 2010. Today, despite the robust industries with about 10 gigawatt per year manufacturing capacity and 90% is indigenous and sector has created enormous jobs, more than 4,000 SME companies. Not only that, now India is exporting quite good level of the components and the turbines to the other part of the world. So gradually India is emerging not for the renewable energy investment, but India is emerging as a renewable energy manufacturing global hub. And that is the new opportunities are emerging very fast in wind and solar, both directions. The huge manufacturing capacity will be expanded in the country, not for India, but export also. Because the best part for any manufacturing company, because of the domestic market itself is so good, so it is giving a base load for them and they can able to leverage the supply chain of India in the current context where the supply chain has disturbed and very expensive. It's a great opportunity for the investors, component manufacturing or turbine manufacturer to invest in India for their global market demand requirement to satisfy. The sector has been facing several issues since the change from FIT regime to the reverse bidding process. During that, also the curtailment under the must-run status, the increase in commodity price and logistic cost currently very high, an increase in GST from 5% to 12%, it is affected adversely impact to the sectoral goals, which is required corrections as early as so that we can maintain our targets and objective as fast as. There is an urgent need of removal of the reverse bidding process from the wheat sector because we have to understand the bidding process is defining with the lowest tariff. But unfortunately, India has an enormous capacity in the more 8 windy states, but all 8 windy states is a different plant load factor. And because of that, it's not possible to achieve the bidding process only can go in the one state because wherever the high PLF is there, the bids goes there. Unfortunately, in any state, India cannot able to execute more than 2,000 megawatt in a year. So by this process, if we continue reverse bidding, in next decade also, every year, we can able to build only 2,000 megawatt, not beyond that. And that is why urgent need to change this bidding process and how we can leverage the 8 state windy sites to execute 14 gigawatts per year. So every state has to deliver 2,000 megawatt per year so that 14 gigawatt we can reach. And by that way, 150 gigawatt by 2030, we can contribute part of the 500 gigawatt capacity and 350 will come from the solar. Despite that, industries is geared up to stand by with the the government in meeting the global commitments and achieving our renewable energy target. Industries are fully equipped and supply chain is fully matured, and we are very confident to deliver as much as wind capacity, because it is extremely important. If we add in Indian economy more and more wind, it will unlock the potentiality for the solar, because it is a very complementary energy, and it is required to stabilize the grid system and optimize the infrastructure utilizations. And that is why the growth of the renewable sector heavily depend on the growth of the wind sector, and that will drive the overall target opportunities. The new opportunity of wind solar hybrid is the future, enhancing the accelerating opportunity in the green hydrogen, opening up of the offshore sector and application of renewable energy in the transport sector would help the industries immensely. So we see the great potentiality and growth going forward, but we have to correct the current policy regulatory framework and to make the sustainable and viable sector so that the target can be achievable, and that is the urgent need to look by the government. I look forward to stimulate deliberation by the global player and other stakeholders to understand and address this, the complex challenge of the country during the next 3 days of this conference. And it will be good food for the thought, for discussion, how to achieve successfully sustainable way 500 gigawatt by 2030 in the India. That will add a lot of value to the mitigating the climate risk for the global society. At Suzlon, we are fully committed to build more and more renewable capacity, not just India, but across the world, and to bring the better world for our next generation. And that's the mission we are working. Thank you very much. And I see the great success of next 3 days event. World Wind Energy Association's event will get the good success and good change in the Indian market requirement. I appreciate all the panelists' time and presence with us to contribute for the India growth. Thank you very much.
Very much, Mr. Tulsitanti. Also, let me say thank you for your personal contributions, also for your company's contributions, not only for this event, but also for your general contributions to the success story of wind energy in India, but also globally. You have been one of the key players from the very first beginning in this sector. And let me also thank you for kind of translating the Indian wind energy target into an annual target of 14 gigawatt. I think this is something that we have to take note of. It is very important to be aware of the dimension, and also making clear we need improved policies to achieve such targets. This is a discussion that we need to have now around the world, because the policies that are in place are not sufficient to achieve the climate neutral world that the leaders of our world have agreed on, which is so urgently necessary. We will have a panel that will explicitly discuss policies, but of course this will be a topic that I think will be discussed in many of the sessions in the next 3 days. So again, thank you very much. And with this, it's my great pleasure to welcome our next speaker, His Excellency, the Ambassador of Norway, Mr. Hans-Josef Frydenlund. Of course, this is a World Wind Energy Conference, so we have people, as I mentioned, from amongst the speakers from more than 30 countries. The audience will probably have more countries even represented. And of course, it makes sense that we also have country partners. And it's a great pleasure that Norway has agreed to be the partner of this event. Norway is, without doubt, one of the renewable energy champions of the world. Your electricity supply is close to 100% renewable energy, mainly thanks to your hydropower resources, but you play a much, of course, a very important role now in Europe as a battery for Europe, but you also invest in other technologies as a country. And we look very much forward now to your special address as our country partner to speak to our audience. Mr. Frydenlund, excuse me, Mr. Frydenlund, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stefan. And allow me, as a Norwegian ambassador to India, to focus primarily on our two countries. But I believe and I hope what I will say is also relevant to a wider public. Distinguished dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to be here at the World Wind Energy Conference 2021. And I must congratulate the organizers, Terry, and the World Wind Energy Association for picking up this important topic for the conference. The conference is very timely, soon after the COP26, because Glasgow clearly demonstrated the need to move quickly on renewable energy in order to keep the Earth's temperature rise within 1.5 degrees. We all need energy to keep our economies growing, but we have to work towards alternatives that do not contribute to global warming. Clean energy is the need of the hour. Wind and solar energy are a major part of the solution. And I can proudly say that Norway has set ambitious targets for climate action. We are committed to achieve a reduction of some 55% of 1990 levels by 2030. And Norway will be climate neutral by 2030 and a low emission society by 2050. Norway not only stresses on the need for action by all, but also extends support actions by other countries. In Glasgow, our Prime Minister announced a new climate investment initiative to fund renewable energy in developing countries. Norway will double its climate financing from $850 million in 2020 to $1.7 billion by 2026. In addition, we aim to develop and export clean technologies that can be used beyond our borders. Dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen, Norway is already running on renewable energy. Like Mr. Zenger said, about 87% of our electricity production is from hydropower. But the production of wind power has been increasing rapidly. In the last year, from October 2020 to October 21, it has increased by 60%. And today, about 12% of our electricity production now comes from wind power. Norway is a wind-swept country with a long history of energy production and export. Development of offshore wind technology is a key priority for the Norwegian government. Our goal is to contribute to innovation and industry development that builds on our decades of experience from offshore oil and gas production. Now, Norwegian companies are pioneering technologies in other areas, including solar power, floating offshore wind, and energy storage. I hope Indian companies will look to Norway for partners when making plans for the future. Meeting our climate goals will require quite unprecedented levels of international cooperation. I strongly believe Norwegian technology can contribute to India meeting its ambitious renewable energy targets. There are many exciting projects going on in Norway. The prototype turbine, which served as a basis for the first commercial wind farm, was developed in Norway. Norway is also constructing the world's largest floating wind farm, the Hywind Tampen, with a total capacity of 88 megawatts and giving CO2 reductions of more than 200,000 tons annually. In the UK, and together with partners, Equinor is developing the world's largest offshore wind farm that will generate 18 terawatt hours annually, enough electricity to supply 6 million homes. In Norway, we are now opening offshore areas to build wind farms with at least 4.5 gigawatt capacity, and happy to see strong interest from energy companies, as well as our supply industry in developing new projects. We're not only developing projects, but also a green supplier industry and accelerating new innovations and developments of other green industries. Developing our domestic offshore wind resource provides a test bed for innovation and further improvement in the technology. Together with other renewables, clean energy, and energy storage systems, offshore wind will form a new chapter in Norway's history as an energy nation. With respect to offshore wind, India, with its long coastline and promising wind profile, is equally blessed with tremendous opportunities. As Norwegian ambassador to India, it is my goal to facilitate Norway-India partnership on this journey. My colleague from Innovation Norway will elaborate further on this in the offshore wind session tomorrow. I'm glad to see a lot happening also in the solar industry. Recently, Reliance Industries bought REC Group, an international pioneering solar energy company headquartered in Norway. I am sure this will only be one example of increased business cooperation in this area. The goals presented by the Honourable Prime Minister Narendra Modi in Glasgow are important for the world and for the global climate. That India will meet 50% of its energy requirements from renewable energy by 2030 and achieve net zero emissions by 2070 shows that you have a long-term plan for green transition. This makes India even more attractive for foreign investors and companies. I am sure this conference will open up opportunities for us to explore partnerships with the participating countries and companies in the wind and solar field. Let me thank Terry and the World Wind and Energy Association for having organized this conference. I also thank International Solar Alliance and other agencies for their support to the conference. I wish the conference good luck and look forward to fruitful deliberations. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Frydenlund. It's a great pleasure to have you with us. And again, thank you so much for all the support that you're giving to this event, but also in general, your country for advancing the transformation to renewable energy in India, but also in other parts of the world. And also for making Norway a kind of example for other countries to follow. So with this, we are coming to the end of this opening ceremony. I would now like to hand over to my colleague, Mr. Prasad, who is Senior Fellow at TERI, for kind of summarizing and vote of thanks. Prasad, I hand over to you, and let me say, great pleasure working with you the last months to preparing this event and making it possible. It's great now that we have the event actually happening. Prasad.
Thank you, Stephen. Good afternoon, all. It is my proud privilege to propose this vote of thanks to this international panel of experts and from their own fields. It is my heart which is thriving now to propose this. And first of all, we are grateful to His Excellency Ambassador of Norway for supporting us this event. In fact, Norway has come up with this proposal that they would like to be country partners. Glad for that, sir. Thank you very much. I also would like to thank Mr. Vivek Kumar of Norway Embassy, who has excellently coordinated for this, and thank him for his understanding as well for our day-to-day. I'd like to thank our beloved Dr. Ajay Malsar. He is an international personality, and we have grown along with him. He has guided us, he has trained us during the years when he was in DG here, when he was in director here. And now we are all proud at TERI that he is DG ISA. We thank him for his immediate acceptance of our request and giving his speech. He's so accommodative to whatever request we are sending. He's just immediately accepting, so despite of his busy schedules with various things as DGISA. Thank him. Thank you, sir. We thank Sri Tulsi Tantiji, Chairman Sula. In fact, I knew him from the days of 1996, and I also had the privilege of having a few interactions with him in the past. And we thank Suzlan, Tulsi Tantiji, for supporting this event as a sponsor for this event. Thank you, sir. We thank Sumant Sinhaji for accepting our invitation in a short notice and giving us his address during this conference a few minutes back. Thank you, sir. We thank Peter Ray, President World Wind Energy Association and Stephen together for initially awarding this work to us an year and a half back. That was last July 2020. And from then onwards, we have been having great work with them together, Dr. Peter Ray and Stephen. We have been having interactions and discussions all that. Thank you, WWA, again, once again, for giving this list and bringing this first session to this level at the moment. I would like to thank Dr. Vibhadhavan, our Director Terry, Director General Terry. She has been very encouraging from the beginning after she has taken over at DG Terry. And in fact, we had interactions between WWA and DG Terry, though she has a lot of time pressures in the past, having taken over at DG in the last few months. Thank you, ma'am. It's our great pleasure to have you a few minutes back. Please. We would like to thank Deputy Director General Gauri Singh. Though she could not participate in person, but she has given us, she was kind enough to send her video, which has been displayed. And she had also expressed her very delightful insights during this conference. I thank all my colleagues at Terry, including Mr. Girish Sethi, our program director, and our program cell people, and all other people, our Director of Renewable Energy Technology, Sirish Garud, is sitting next to me. We thank all of them from the deep of our heart. It would be, I would fail if I don't mention one person in this whole effort, Dr. Ashwini Kumar. He has been continuously helping me in organizing this event, giving various suggestions, various things. Thank you, sir. I cannot express more than this. With all this, I thank you all. Thank you, the panelists. Thank you, everyone. If I have missed someone, please bear with that. And thank you for your kind attention. Now, we would like to announce, but please keep on your mics, the video camera on. We would like to take a photograph for the
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And since there is 1 more minute time for me, it would be my pleasure to propose another vote of thanks to Jami Hussain, who is sitting there. He also has been excellently contributing for the last 1.5 years throughout this as part of WWE.
Thank you very much, Prasad. And I would just follow your words of thanks. Thanks for kind of thanking everyone here. And of course, from our side, let me say thank you very much to both of you. Mr. Shirish Garud, who is sitting next to you, and Prasad, it's been a pleasure to work with you. And now let's invite, as kind of the last intervention for this opening ceremony, Dr. Jami Hussain, who has already been instrumental in the first World Wind Energy Conference, which we had in India in 2006, and has been a board member of WWEA for many years. Dr. Jami Hussain.
Thank you, Stephen. I would just like to say that what an amazing conference this is, that we are doing virtually. Earlier, such a scale of conference could only be thought physically. We have 3 days of conference with parallel tracks, people plugging in from many different countries. like many people do not like this idea of having a virtual conference because it's sort of they're not comfortable with it, but it's a great thing and it is the future because the less we travel and the more we interact virtually, it is better for the environment also, climate and net zero also. So with that, I would like to thank everybody and taking this vision forward with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. So with this, we will now officially close this opening ceremony.